morning. Everyone can keep their microphones muted unless you want to ask a question. So just to remind you all that we're recording today, and just so that you know that. So I thought the first 15 minutes before we start with Cutter Patel, who will be with us, I would just talk a little bit about last week and I'll remind you of a couple things. At least from the standpoint of the faculty, there are two surveys that are out there that I need you to respond to and to answer. One is the one that Jess sent, which is a little bit more, probably longer, a little bit more detailed. And the other one is the one that I said at the beginning of the conference also that I want people to look at. We're going to do a formal evaluation, but I'm going to wait until the end to do that. So as you're going through, if you want to collect notes or email it ideas, that's good also. I do want to acknowledge, we've been talking in the breakfast session, we will say, about it's been a stressful week, regardless of where your politics lay. A lot of uncertainty, and I think a lot of uncertainty. We've already had the existential crisis of the pandemic, which we've got 110,000 cases, new cases as of yesterday, and now we have the election. So one of the kind of round robin things I want to ask before we get started is how are people dealing with that? You know, what's going on with your students? What are you seeing with your students? And we have a lot of students in the room too, so they can chime in also. So just, you know, go ahead and undo your microphone, and then I'll call on you. Once you undo your microphone, then you kind of go to the top of my screen, and then I'll say, tell me what you're thinking. Susan, tell me what's going on.
Hi all, good morning. I'm from Nassau Community College in Garden City, New York. I've been very involved with civic engagement this semester. So one thing I've been trying to do to keep students feeling sort of lifted with support if they have questions, which understandably, I'm sure they do, as we all do, about the outcome of the election and the process, is that we've been having these things called deliberative dialogues. And I received training through the SUNY system. I guess it was August, in order to have facilitate these dialogues. And they've been tremendously successful. Students will come in for extra credit, and it's not a teaching situation on my part, but it's an opportunity. I'm a moderator, and so are some other faculty that did it with me. And it's a great project. So I recommend it if anyone's interested. I'm happy to answer questions about it.
That's great. Yeah. The people can chat with you directly. So that's really important that in other words, I think a lot of us were anticipating what was going to be happening and then kind of putting things in place to respond to that. So that's great. Anybody else talk about, like with Susan, something you've been doing or something they're experiencing or what they're seeing with their students or what they're seeing with themselves this week? And that we can, like, once again, just, so Samuel, go ahead.
Hi, this is a bit more about history than peace, but I've been going through my U.S. history to 1877, and it's fun because I just went through the election that elected Polk and the Mexican-American War, so it's fun seeing different campaigns throughout the years and how they compare to this.
Yeah, and it's, you know, even though we're thinking this is kind of once in a lifetime, it isn't. We've been on this cusp before. We've had the Tilden Hayes election of 1876, and we had Bush 20 years ago. We've been, so kind of going back in history and looking at that's kind of valuable. Thanks. Annette, what are you thinking?
I'm at Allegheny College of Maryland, Cumberland campus, and I'm the Peace Club president there. And I'll tell you, COVID has been just detrimental to all the clubs on campus.
Yeah.
We've had to go online in a lot of cases. Some people, because of quarantines, they're afraid to come on campus, and keeping people involved in the community and in the campus community is very, very challenging right now.
Have you seen anything though, like with this week? I mean, there's higher level of stress. I mean, what are you experiencing or seeing with other students or?
Yes, I'm in the human services program, and thankfully we have a lot of labs where we can talk about things in groups, and we've got the mind-body medicine skills, which I was also trained in, that has been helpful to all of us. We incorporate that into the curriculum. There's a lot of conversation, and self-care is huge You know, we try to build each other up, but everybody is so stressed out about this election and what that might mean, and the, you know, COVID-19 situation, all of it. So we're just kind of taking it day by day because nobody knows when or if things are going to shut down. Allegheny County has had a rise along with most of Maryland. And so we're hoping to be able to stop this semester right before Thanksgiving break, but we don't know that. You know, we're hoping. It's been stressful.
I know that area really well, so thanks. Sharon, how are you?
Good morning or good afternoon to you all.
How are you? How are things in Austin?
You know, to state the obvious, COVID responses and our students and our own responses to this election are so intertwined. I'm thinking of 4 years ago when we had already scheduled. I'm sorry, I'm shooting from Austin Community College in Austin, Texas. And we had this amazing artist scheduled to come to do a peace papers project. What he had brought with him were clothing, old t-shirts and things from refugees in Berlin. He brought them, and then we had our students and people from the refugee community in Austin come and turn these pieces of clothing into paper and then put designs and paint them. That was what we did in the 2 days following the 2016 election. And that was so healing for all of us to just be together. And now we're, you know, staring at our own computers. And I find that my students are, first of all, I have limited contact with students. And they're just exhausted. They're just like, you know, when we debrief at the beginning of class, there isn't much to say.
Right. And there isn't much to say. And I mean, students have a hard time even articulating how they're feeling sometime, right? In other words, you can see people have a stress level, but, you know, the idea is that how do you articulate that feeling in a way, right? Sometimes is a challenge too, right?
And, you know, personally, you know, I'm an Iranian immigrant. I thought maybe I wouldn't be shocked by anything that happens, but I'm just shocked that I thought we could count on elections being smooth.
Right.
Not easy, but smooth in the US. And
right. I mean, this is challenge our whole notion of what how elections run in the United States, and a lot of other people are looking at us and saying, you know, you're telling us what to do, and you know, bad on you, right? So
thanks for the space.
Yeah. Anybody else want to give me how they're feeling, what's going on in their neck of the woods this week? Just open your mic and then you'll kind of go to the top and I'll just kind of call on you. Kind of share what's going on with your students.
Hi.
Hi, Marley. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so happy to say I have 8 students here today. I'm really
Excellent.
So they're dealing with this well, but I have one class that's, you know, I have 30, and 40 students. In one class, only 4 people showed up on Thursday.
Oh, wow.
The other classes, you know, they about, you know, half to a little bit more. And I just keep encouraging them. We have to figure out a way, you know, I teach in the business department. So I just tell them, we need to, you know, focus on the future and trying to make a better future and trying to get your career and, you know, the world in better shape. And so, you know, we have to be resilient. That's how I try to encourage them.
Yeah. Resilience is that something that we can teach?
No, I don't think so.
I think that's one of the challenges, right? You know, is that something we can teach, or is that just something that is
a long, slow progress of peaceful interaction? It takes a long time.
Yeah, long, slow progress. So, anybody else want to share?
We can model it.
Yeah, Carolyn. Yeah, so tell me about modeling it.
Resiliency.
Yeah.
Yeah, just, you know, as things come down the pike, you can address them as a class and talk about pathways, you know, around or through, I suppose, this stuff. And maybe share some anecdotes of family members and whatnot. I often try to get my students to go back in their family history, because especially at the age of 18 or something along those lines, a lot of times they're trying to build walls between the generations. So they learn a lot going back, you know, to their grandparents or their great aunt and uncle about, you know, the cyclical nature of relationships and history.
Yeah, I mean, history is kind of interesting, right? In other words, this idea that we have dealt with challenging times historically, right? If you think about World War II, we dealt with rationing and the Great Depression and these other periods of time. But as a nation, that's kind of our last experience with it, right? Across the country. And then none of us have experienced that, right? And so, you know, we can talk about historically, but it's, you know, I don't know, it's maybe that's the problem, is that because we haven't been challenged, we're not resilient. I don't know. Is that part of it, right? Anybody else want to add something before we kind of get started formally? All right, why don't we go ahead and let me go through a couple things with you all before we start this morning formally, and I introduce Cutter Patel, and she talks about social justice, and then Dave Ragland after that. Is that we are now basically in the middle of our program, so I'm glad that you're here. We have a few more students with us today, which is wonderful. If faculty have students who want to join this, what you really need to do is email Catherine. So just email her. Everybody's got her email. Let her know. She'll send the link and provide you with registration. I'm not getting involved in that. So go ahead and do that and let her know that. For next Friday, though, we are going to, in the second half of class, the first half of the program next Friday, we have someone coming from the Pulitzer Center, and we're going to be, she came last year, I'm trying to remember. But she's going to show a couple videos. This is Heidi Peppenberg, I think is her name. And we're going to talk about media and so forth. And so we're going to see some shorts and then talk about them. But in the second half of the program next Friday, we are going to have the State Department is going to do a virtual simulation with us. And of course, we've always go to the State Department every year, and we do it at the State Department. But Lauren Fisher, who's my point of contact there, is the education director, has been doing these virtually. Now, the issue has to do with numbers, right? And making sure that I've got enough numbers. What Lauren and I were thinking, because we had a big meeting about this yesterday, is that we'd like to run 2 simulations, because you really need 20 people to run a simulation, right? And we would like to have a simulation that's just students and simulation that's just faculty, staff, graduate students, and undergraduates. One of the reasons for that is that it's nice to kind of let students be in their own space without faculty being in that space sometime. Faculty can be helpful, faculty be encouraging, but sometimes faculty take over, right? And we don't want that to happen. So we want to kind of create 2 different spaces. So one of the things that I really need, but I need at least, say, 20 students and 20 faculty. Now I know I've got 20 faculty administrators lumping you all together. I've got that, but I want to make sure I've got 20 students, right? So I don't know if I've got 20 students in the room today because I've got 37 who have chimed in. So I'm assuming that I've got, well, I may only have a handful of students because there are 35 faculty and staff in this program. So what I want to do is I'm going to send faculty an email either today or Monday. And I really want to do some counting of heads of students that you think could come next week. And even if they're not registered, we could get them to register late. And I want to make sure everybody registers. That's really important that I've got a record of everybody that's registering so that they can be part of that. And because I need to let the State Department know by Tuesday or Wednesday if we're going to run 2 simultaneously simulations, one with students, one with faculty, or we're going to run one combined. I'd actually rather run 2 if I can. Okay. So just to let you know about that, the materials for that simulation, we will send out also in advance, Monday or Tuesday, which I'll send to everybody, students and faculty. Everyone will get it so that they get to see what it is. And it's going to deal with a public health issue. And I'm not going to tell any more about it. I'll just send it out there that you can see what's going on. So everybody clear on that or understand that by and large? Okay, great. Just real briefly, last week and then tomorrow, I'll tell you about tomorrow when we get to the end of things. So last week we did a couple of different things. Obviously, you know, we had on Friday, we had a presentation by Darren Cambridge and Jess Bonham White on their work. And then of course, the first day we had the Global Peace Index, the Institute of Economics and Peace. And we had Heather and Nanette talk about their experiences. Any kind of quick, and I'm opening to everybody here, any quick observations about yesterday? I mean, last week and I mean yesterday. Just Susan.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say I really appreciated all the digital sources that Daryl made available to us for those of us who are working hard to convert our text-based material and curriculum to digital curriculum. Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, that's really useful. Yeah. Anybody else? So Darren provided a lot of resources. How about the Global Peace Index? Anybody using that? You found value in that? Kind of starting with something objective data for people to look at?
Sorry, once again, I want to say I appreciate the update because I've been using, I think the book is right here because I taught this morning. I love Wood's Introduction to Peace Studies, but it's the 2016 edition of this book. I don't know if he has a more recent one, but the index statistics were a little bit outdated. It put the United States at like 82nd out of 163. And as I recall, he told us we were at 121 out of 173.
Right.
So that shows the decrease in US violence. So
yeah, I think that stuff really creates a conversation with students and grounds it kind of in this kind of data. Thank you, Susan.
Yeah.
How about the conversation with Nanette and Heather? That valuable? They're both community college graduates talking about their journey. Any thoughts on that? Anything that you picked up from that? Particularly students? Were they inspiring? Anna Laura?
Yeah, actually, Heather, she went to TCC and then transferred to UCO, and that's exactly what I did. So,
oh, wow.
So yeah, that was actually kind of a really cool thing for me to hear. So this is actually my first semester at UCO, so that was kind of really cool for me to hear that was a really good experience for her there at UCO.
So you both went, you're at University of Central Oklahoma, and that's where she went also?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That is really cool. That's really cool.
I went from TCC like she did, and then I now transferred to UCO.
Oh.
So, and I really enjoyed my experience at the community college. And so I wouldn't trade that for the world, actually. So.
That's great. Great.
I really enjoyed those talks last week.
Good. Thanks. Anybody else? We got another minute or so. Want to share any observations from last week, and particularly the Friday session with the students and the speakers? I've got some people putting in here. Hari said, yes, it's always great to listen to student voices and their perspectives. Lena asked, Anna Laura, were you able to connect with Heather? Did you think about connecting with her by email?
I have not yet. That's due to my own personal studies, but I do plan to after the next couple of weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. Shireen asked if it's recorded. Yeah, everything's recorded, but we're going to embargo all the recordings till after. So after everything is done, then we're going to put everything up publicly so that you know that. So everything was recorded from last week, except the breakfast when we chit chat. I hit the recording once we start at noon. Anybody else? All right, let's move on then. Let's get started with our program today. So let me change my screen here. I want to pull up. Anna, are you there?
You don't need to pull up yet.
I don't need to pull up yet? Okay, well, I haven't shared yet, so that's good.
Yeah, you can.
So good morning.
Good morning.
So I am pleased to introduce Anna Cutter Patel, who Anna and I have worked together for a while on various projects, a lot through the Alliance for Peacebuilding and other organizations. And her experience, because this is really an informal introduction, because I don't want to take more of your time, but her claim to fame, everyone's got a claim to fame, is her work with Outward Bound Peacebuilding, where she was the executive director. Now I think you kind of graduating to kind of some senior status of some sort, right? And working there. Probably that experience, because every time I talk to her, somehow the Peace Corps comes into this also, talking about she's a returned Peace Corps volunteer. She was in the Dominican Republic. She was a Rotary Peace Fellow, which is another recommendation that I make for people to consider the Rotary Peace Fellow program, which is a really great. And were you in Thailand?
Yes.
You were in
yes.
Thailand for that. She's got a master's from Columbia, a bachelor's from Lewis and Clark College. And like I said, she comes most every year, and it's a physical thing, right? We get around in a circle and we kind of do that. I don't think we're going to be doing that in the same way this time, but just the same, we're going to do what we can, right? Kind of a thing. So I'm glad that you're here today. So I'm just going to turn it right over to you, and you tell me what buttons you want me to hit.
Oh, great. So, hi, hello, everyone. So I'm Anna, and part of this presentation is about the journey of the last couple months of becoming someone who considers themselves an experiential learning facilitator, and figuring out how to do that in a virtual community. Experiential learning is learning by doing and reflecting. And I worked for 10 years in the Outward Bound community. Maybe some of you guys know it. Give me a hand if any of you guys have heard of Outward Bound. Basically, it's an opportunity for young people and adults to go out into wild environments, outdoors environments, and learn leadership, teamwork, compassion, grit, resilience, many of the words that you were talking about earlier in your opening sharing, but in a wilderness environment, and by being on a journey with a small group of people. Of course, COVID has changed all of that. And what has been really interesting is to watch our facilitators and trainers figure out, how do you do that same thing without the wilderness environment, which we in many ways were so dependent on. And so that's been a really interesting journey, and one I'm excited about. But we still need to move, right? We're humans, and this sitting in front of the Zoom, I would love to be in a room for you guys, with you guys. I miss people very much. I miss spending lots more time in the outdoors with people. I do it, but I tend to be 6 feet apart and distanced, or in a very, very small group, or with my dog, which is the usual way it happens. And so to start us out, and because probably most of us, most of you like me, have been on Zooms already today, I'm going to ask you to stand up. And so we know, right, instinctually, that there's a huge connection between our brains and our bodies and our ability to sort of pay attention to things. So some of you are already maybe at standing desks like me. I have to do this. And I'm just going to ask you very quickly to shake your left hand. Let's shake your left hand. Let's shake your right hand. And you can't see me, but let's shake that left foot. Shake your right foot. And then maybe do some hip wiggling. You've been sitting. All of our hips are getting really sore from doing all of this. All right, thank you very much. And then maybe just one shake all around, right? To get it all out, right? All right, thank you. I see a lot of movement there. We are getting so stationary, and it is not good for our health to be so stationary. So I welcome you back to be in whatever way you're comfortable. Stay standing as I am, or join us in whatever way makes you more comfortable. I have to say that if you're in a position of running a classroom or any kind of community, starting with something physical in any way that you can, maybe it's a moment of breathing together, maybe it's a moment of centering, just even a stand up and sit down with your participants, with your audience, with your community, is really a good way to start and get people to refocus on the room. It feels like a distraction, but it's not. It's a way to get the mind to focus back on the topic and on the virtual room that you're in together. I remember, David was talking about the conference that we both go to yearly, the Alliance for Peacebuilding. And I remember a woman from years ago. I remember the organization she was with, and she just asked us to stand up and sit down, the entire audience. It was a packed room. And I don't remember anybody else's presentation, but I remember hers. She was head of the business school at University of San Diego, their business and conflict program. And just by asking us to stand up and sit down, it made such a huge difference. So that is a tool I use a lot, and I encourage you all to try it out, see what works for you. I love the way David starts out with you all with about, so it looks like sort of 10 to 15 minutes of just sort of hearing what's going on with you all. It's a crazy week. It's been a crazy 8 months. It's been a wild ride for a couple of years, no matter what side or where you are on the political spectrum. And so this idea of checking in with your community is very important. Most of us are using Zoom or Google Meetup, et cetera, when we're together with our communities. So one way that I use to check in is to ask you all to give me one word in the chat that describes how you're feeling today. Just give me one word and I'll start us out. All right, I'm seeing a whole bunch of stuff here. Great. Whew. Lovely. Hopeful, sunny, dreamy, hectic, tired, sleepy, hopeful, antsy, anxious, tired. All of us are maybe tired from spending too much time on Zoom and from checking our various media outlets too many times over the last day and night. All right. So what I'd like to do, thank you so much. Warm, oh good, somebody's warm. I'm cold, so I'm gonna borrow some of that warmness. And apathetic, I hope we can get you to feel a little differently. All right, what I would love to do is get us started on the presentation. David, or is that Lena who's doing that, to get us on the agenda slide. Basically, while they're doing that, I will walk through the agenda. Did you hear me, David? Lena? You guys hear me, right? Yeah, okay. All right, well, hopefully someone is gonna share the presentation relatively soon, but I'll just go over the agenda while we're waiting for them to do that. Basically, I want to, first of all, have a short discussion about a definition for social justice. I wanna tell you all a story about a cyber conference that I was involved in June, which was really important to me and also really showed me the opportunities that we have in front of us in these virtual communities, as well as some of the obstacles. I want to debrief that a little, and I want to talk about the power of social media. And I'm going to say the power, I think we are very aware of the perils. So for this presentation, we're going to focus on some of the opportunities that social justice has provided, and talk about that, and hopefully hear some of the examples of you all are using or have seen or have been excited about. Then we're going to go into some group work, and really I'm going to sort of challenge you to come up with different ways to use those. Okay, so let's see what we have here. All right, so we can move on to the agenda slide. Thank you. I don't know if I have the possibility. No, I don't. If you make me a host, I can also, or a co-host, I can also advance the slides. But the next slide, please, is just the agenda. All right. Can I do that? No, let me see. Okay. So there is an agenda for our work. One thing I do think is important when you're working virtually is for people to understand how their time is going to be used, right? Many of us are exhausted by being in Zoom. So I think with an agenda, it's helpful for people to feel a little bit more in control of how their time is being used. The story I want to talk, well, I first want to start with a question to you all is, what is social justice? And I'm looking at hands. Hopefully David and or Lena will help me look at some hands. What's a definition of social justice for you? There's no wrong answers. I'm just really interested and want to get you thinking about, what does social justice mean to you? Someone ready to do it? I'm very capable of picking on people, so anyone ready to put it out there? Who's that?
Sheila. So seeing something wrong in your society and finding ways to balance it or correct it.
Fantastic. Anybody else? Anyone want to build on that?
Sure.
Okay. Lynn?
But work in the society to ensure equality and dignity for all human beings.
Nice, nice. Tulin Levitas, please.
Respecting each person's equal rights.
Fantastic, fantastic. Anyone else? Anyone else willing?
Me.
Samuel.
I feel social justice is making sure that the rights of all human beings are maintained. No one is left out.
Fantastic. Annette.
The fair and equal treatment of its citizens.
Very good. Very good. That sounds very close to sort of the textbook one that I've seen. Someone in the chat. Yes, you're welcome to use the chat. If you're not comfortable speaking out loud, please use the chat. Great. Well, those are all.
One of my students said, I'm sorry. She said, no one will judge by color and respectfully treat everyone respectfully equal.
Great. Great.
When everyone in a situation is recognized as a person.
Okay, wonderful. Anybody else? So I love all of these because they're answers that really come from the heart and using sort of words and language that we use every day. If you look up sort of the textbook answer, it's about opportunities. It's the concept of fair and just relations between individuals in a society, and measured by the opportunity of wealth and opportunities, or the distribution of wealth and opportunities for all of them, social privileges for all those individuals. And so I really like that idea of the opportunities. Do all humans or individuals in a society have the same opportunities? And what can we do, and how can we work to make sure that that is true? So thank you very much for participating in that. I want to start by telling a story. So like many of you all, in March, I stopped a very busy travel schedule, a conference, exciting summer plans, interesting professional opportunities. All of that sort of slid to an immediate stop and was replaced by a lot of anxiety and fear and isolation. And like many of you, no, we're gonna go, whoever is, yeah, I will give you a verbal cue to switch to the next slide, please. Okay, thank you. So all of us are part of many communities, and many of us found, in the best of cases, that those communities then moved into a virtual format. So as David, David, okay, someone's fooling around with the presentation. Let's just here for now, please. Just hold here.
Anna, I shared host with you, so if you want to share your screen instead, you can do that.
All right, let's see. That's okay. If you don't mind helping me out, I would love that. I just don't want to.
I'll take care of it. I'll listen for your verbal cues.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. I try to use these not as a way to sort of focus the whole thing, but just as a way to remind me where I'm going and give you all a little bit of a visual besides my face to look at. But so many oops. All right. Well, So we'll get that screen back in a minute. So I'm going to tell a story about this conference. So many of these virtual communities went online, or many of my communities went online, including the my Peace Corps community, which David alluded to, certainly my mom's group, my neighborhood group, but also my Rotary Peace Fellow group. And I am going to take a second to talk about the Rotary Peace Fellowship, because as educators and students, this is an extraordinary opportunity, and that I feel is not yet really well known for those who are interested in peace, peace building, and conflict resolution. So Rotary is the biggest service organization in the world. Their whole point is service above self. That is the motto. And they are also now the largest investor in graduate level peace building education in the world. They have 7 peace centers, one in Tokyo, there's one in Thailand, there's one in Australia, one in England, one in the United States, it's Duke UNC, there's a new one in Ghana. And these are places where you can apply to have a completely free graduate degree, pursue a completely free master's degree in peace or peace building through Rotary, completely subsidized by Rotary. This is incredible. They also have a mid-career fellowship for you people out there who are professors and teachers. They have a mid-career professional program. And that's a program that I applied to and participated in 2016. I didn't know anything about Rotary. I wasn't a Rotarian. I had a board member on my organization, Outward Bound Peace Building, that was a Rotarian, and he kept pushing me towards this. And so in 2016, I got on a plane and I went to Bangkok in Thailand at Chulalongkorn University, and I joined 24 mid-age, mid-level professionals in a basically 12-week, 2.5-month program. And I have to say, I went in with a lot of hubris, because I have taught, peace building for years at the School of International and Public Affairs at Columbia University. I had worked for the United Nations in this area. I've written 2 books on the topic. I led an organization. So I really thought that there was not going to be a lot of new material that I could get. I was extremely surprised. One was the level of the group that I was with. I was one of only 2 North Americans. The rest were from all over the world. So right there, an incredibly rich opportunity. Also, all of my professors were mostly from East and South Asia. And thus the case studies and the approaches in many of the institutions that were reference points were totally different from what I had learned in a Western focused institution like Columbia University. And then, of course, being in Bangkok, being in Thailand, having an opportunity to travel to Cambodia through the program, just a fascinating thing. So I really encourage people to look into that opportunity. I think new applications will be out and ready in January. Yes, some of it has moved to be virtual, but they're very much hoping in 2021, like we all are, that will open up and be able to be a live program. Because of the intensity of that 3 months, my group of 24 individuals has been very, very close since we left Bangkok. We mostly through a WhatsApp group, occasional opportunities to see each other and visit, but that's been my way to kind of stay connected to that community. However, in March, what happened is we began to form not just my little group of 24, but to realize that there were over 2,000 now Rotary Peace Fellows that have gone through the various programs, either the master's program or their mid-career program in the last 10 years. And that we had a power, we had a community in and of ourselves. So we formed an alumni community. We got 501(c) nonprofit status, all while we were sort of virtual. And we decided that the first thing we were going to do would be offer programming. And so we offered a series of programs, and it was mostly because we were sitting in our bedrooms or in our basements, as I am now in my basement, and we were hungry to both hear from our peers and what they were doing around the world, those who still had a little bit more freedom of movement, and or we were very concerned about the impact of COVID on the issues we care. For example, the rising violence against women all over the world. to the point of being what they call the silent pandemic. That was a major topic that we went to in the webinars. But there were also topics about really interesting ways to use art and music, even in a virtual environment. So then we had the great idea that these weekly seminars are going so well, and we're building an audience for it. And people are also spontaneously donating money, that we were going to do a virtual conference. And that's what we did. I'm going to talk a little bit about what was the good about it, what was the bad about it. But what happened was we ended up having a 24-hour conference. There were over 1,500 participants. The entire thing was done by volunteers. We had 50 panel sessions, something like 400 experts from around the room. The way it worked is that there was a team in sort of Asia, Australia. There was a team in Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and there was a team in the Americas. And they all built their own conference, and then we connected them with various speakers and or musical performances, spoken word, etc. It was extraordinary. It was exhausting and exhilarating. I stayed up for the entire sort of 24-hour period, which actually ended up being a lot longer than that. We had extraordinary performances. We raised, with not asking for one dime, people just spontaneously donated. We raised over $10,000 without an ask on the whole thing, which did enable us to pay for the platform. And we were listened from experts from John Paul Lederach, who maybe some of you all have read or use in your classrooms, to groups who do a lot of gender work. We had a whole presentation from UNEP, which is the UN's environmental program, and it was all done virtually. So let's move to the next slide, please. Thanks, Lena. Great. So when I think about the experience and what happened, one of the ways that I try to think and debrief is what is a plus delta. Does anyone use the plus delta? Can I see that? Does anyone know what that is? So basically, the idea is it's supposed to be an affirmative way to offer evaluation or feedback. The plus side, which is on my left, hopefully on your left screen, is sort of what went well and what was exciting. And then the delta side is what could be changed or what do we need to rethink. When I teach a class or a seminar or a workshop, I try to do a plus delta on Post-its at the end so we can get a quick, check-in of what people are doing and what they're thinking. Obviously, in a virtual environment, we can use the chat for that. So what was the plus of this huge conference? And what were the things that we learned in terms of connecting in a virtual environment? Well, the first was that we had to build the community. So we had started with weekly seminars that had happened at the same time every week. And we built our community and our audience over 10 weeks. So we created a sense of regularity. More and more people started to come. The words came out. And we were slowly building the community. It was also an incredibly inclusive and empowering process. Anyone from the community could propose or host a meeting or a panel. We had one sort of person whose job was really to help it, but we created documents, again, all volunteer led, to help them think through how to organize it. And then we all supported by being moderators of the chat, of helping them with the slideshow. And everybody just sort of volunteered week after week, particularly if it was a topic that they were interested in. The topics went from everything from food systems for peace, to music for peace, to gender-based violence under COVID, to environmental concerns under COVID, et cetera, et cetera. Pretty much every topic you can think about in the peace building field. Before we started the idea of the conference, though, or when the idea of the conference came through as a group, we decided to define success together. And we used one of these word cloud programs where everybody puts in a word. And the word that came out the most was about joy, because in the end, connecting with people and organizing and learning needs to be joyful, because if it's not, then why are we doing it? I think that is in some ways the power of a progressive movement, is to bring joy. In this moment, the thing that's bringing me the most joy in all this election worry, et cetera, is the Instagrams on #JoyToThePolls. Look at it. It's all about music and art, et cetera, as people celebrate the right we have of citizens of this country to cast a vote. So this agreement on a definition of success that, yes, we wanted to talk about a lot of topics. We wanted anyone who wanted to be involved. We were going to make it free and open to the public, and that we were going to try to find all opportunities for joy together and have a lot of fun. We also recognized and made space for regional differences. So we asked people to, volunteer to lead the regional parts of the conference. And then it was hands off. Even though I was part of the global organizing team, our role was really to create the structure for the conference. We had nothing to do with content. So the Asia group really had a fantastic time of thinking through what is their approach and what are the difference even in their region, and what are the things they want to highlight. And it was very different in many ways from the continent approach to that of the European and Africa group who did their conference right after, then from the Americas. There were 7 languages spoken throughout the entire conference. We had entire sessions in Spanish, we had entire sessions in Portuguese, we had entire sessions in Mandarin. And that is, I think, a great opportunity for virtual environments that is hard to have. We also used innovative use of social media to sort of drive our audience. So people did Instagram stories, they used Facebook stories, they used TikTok, which is, something that as someone who's 50 plus is out of my area of expertise, but it was extraordinary to watch how it was used. The other things that really worked for us is to have regular meetings, and then of course to have a strong reflection and evaluation piece to it. And I'm happy to share the conference report with anyone who's interested. In terms of the deltas, technology was difficult. We all have been in those Zoom moments where there's been either a Zoom bombing or where the technology hasn't worked or somebody's Wi-Fi is terrible or there's no audio. And we did have issues between the interface between Zoom and the conference participants and over the overlap. So on to the next thing. So in terms of this conference, I think it was a really exciting, for me, example of how you can connect in a virtual space. And it was really, in many ways, my first opportunity to do so. Again, over 1,500 participants and a team that has remained very, very strong. So I'm interested now, I'm just looking at the time. Oh, wow, we've really gone over. All right, so I'm going to go quickly to a couple other things that I wanted to say before we get to a discussion. The next slide is looking at the power of social media. So I don't know if many of you all will recognize this, but we have had, there is a way to connect using conferences and fundraising and brand awareness or targeted marketing for your campaign or your issue. But there's also social media, which particularly the young generation has been showing us ways in which to use these tools. If you want to also talk about the perils of that, then we can talk about, you should all go watch the documentary, The Social Dilemma, which is a great way to focus on that. Here, I want to talk about some interesting ways in which social media has been used to thwart messages of hate. How many of you all know the Proud Boys example? Anyone? So I'm seeing some nods around here. Right. Okay. So briefly, anyone would love to tell me that story themselves instead of me talking? Is anyone interested in putting that out there?
I can.
Please.
The Proud Boys specifically were made mention in the first presidential debate that caused a lot of news on social media about them. Maybe some people who didn't know them or just renewed interest in some. So then, well, actually, I hope I got this right. Social media members of the LGBT started taking over the hashtag Proud Boys on Twitter and Instagram and posting pictures of themselves.
Exactly. So taking over the hashtag Proud Boys, which had been a symbol of sort of white supremacy and or violence around the election process, was then taken over by really photographs and messages of love between and partnership and marriage between members of the LGBTQ community. So just really countering a message of sort of hate and chaos with an overwhelming one of love. In the same way is the K-pop versus the white supremacy. I think this is a rather brilliant one and fascinating if you're looking at the ways that social media is being used. So K-pop, for those who don't know it, is about the Korean pop star world, which is a galaxy in and of itself. And there is a monster audience for these usually young pop bands. And they are, if we can go back, please. And the idea is that if you hashtag one of these groups on Twitter or Facebook, but mostly Twitter, I would say, that the whole army of or community of people who care about K-pop will come into that. And so what started to happen with Black Lives Matter and other social justice kinds of movements is they started hashtagging the K-pop groups in order or into white supremacy threads and taking over these threads with K-pop pictures and videos of concerts and stories of adoration for these bands. And so the messages that these different kinds of white supremacy channels were trying to get out were totally thwarted and interrupted. All right, another example really quickly is the weaponizing of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. And so what we did see in the virtual space is many artists, maybe you follow many of them on Instagram, were having their art get stolen, basically. Their ideas, their illustrations get stolen and used in other ways that they did not give permission for. And as individual artists, they usually didn't have the money to get lawyers to go after the copyright rights for that use. And so they were really being put in a position of seeing their work. One of the only ways that artists can get their work out there right now is virtually, but seeing that then them losing both revenue and rights to their work as it got spread without permission. And a thing that I think is just absolutely brilliant, there is someone who does have the money to go after every copyright violation, and that's Disney. And so artists began to put Disney music or Disney images, copyrighted Disney music or images on and behind their own work. And so if that was used or taken without permission, then Disney would be the one that would go after the copyright privileges. So just another really interesting way in which that tool was. And finally, many of you are probably know, or you have students or young people, in my case, a 17-year-old son, who watches people play games on YouTube. This is just a crazy phenomena to me, but it is a huge phenomena. And often people tip them while they're doing it. So they actually make money for doing things like, there's one woman who eats food while she talks about different K-pop bands, for example, or people that play some kind of game. And as they're playing the game, they're making maybe political commentary, or Twitch is one of the examples of this. And people tip them as they're doing it. What we're seeing now in isolated cases, but in some interesting cases, is that YouTubers are raising money for social justice movements. So for example, YouTubers raised quite a bit of money for Stacey Abrams' Fair Fight organization, which really registered 800,000 new voters in Georgia since 2018, or for Black Lives Matter, and or for other organizations and movements like this. So there's a huge power to target for positive and for connecting virtually with social justice movements. All right, I've taken way too long. I am sorry, but I did want, David, do we still have an opportunity to go quickly into small groups? I see him on here.
Yeah, Anna,
Yeah.
I'm not sure we're going to be able to do it. And the reason is that we didn't set this up originally for small groups, and my person I can't reach. So is there another way of doing it without setting up? That's what we've been trying to frantically figure out.
Oh, no worries. So why don't we take the presentation down and just have a discussion? I love the fact that we have we have a couple different generations represented in this group, and I'd be really interested to hear how in your classrooms are you using some of these tools or connecting virtually to social justice, for social justice. And so why don't we sort of use the final time we have for that and then happy to take any questions. But I'm really interested in your experiences and or the challenges, but really interested in your experience in using some of these tools of social media, even Zoom and Facebook and Twitter and Twitch, et cetera. But also, how are you doing in connecting? We can use the raise the hand, or you can use the chat. Jillian?
Hello. Oh, great presentation. So right now I'm teaching a class on race and ethnicity. So I use a public library sometimes. That's something I hadn't been doing. So, you know, for example, we talked about the American Indians, that's the whole story right there. And so they have books out there, suggested books that you could read or some video or this, that, and the other. So I posted that online and said, hey, students, if you want to have some additional information, then check out your library, which I'm always promoting the library anyway. So that's just, and I use all of, the usual things, Zoom, and, and we have our open discussions and YouTube and etc. So yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other examples. Annette, would you mind saying that out loud for us?
If I must. Okay.
Amazing background.
Thank you. It covers up the ugly. Anyway, yeah, we've been in our human services Peace Club groups. We've been incorporating Facebook because most everybody is on it, whether we like it or not. We've been incorporating the Facebook chat and also the Facebook group, well, the group chat group page, to let each other know when we find out about social justice events and just things that we might be interested in coming to, such as this and other, the Black Lives Matter. We had a march that was advertised a lot on that was local, and just using it that way. It's been helpful to us.
Anyone else have an example? Thank you so much, Nat. That was great. Sloan?
Hi, so I run our the Office of International Education Instagram and like social medias for our college. And so at the kind of beginning of quarantine, obviously a big push I think for most people was to go more virtual. And part of that was increased activity on our social media sites, because it's an easy way to reach people like fairly consistently. And so I went through kind of a day-to-day calendar of like significant events, and pulled out some like social justice happenings from years and years ago to like more recent, to post those on our social media to bring more awareness to it. I know I've learned a lot from doing that, from making them, and being able to share them. And then on top of that, people can go ahead and share them beyond just our page with other people.
I love that. I do. Yeah, I think one of the interesting things that why I wait to see you guys raise some hands from our cyber conference for peace is that I saw is, for example, we had a small group from Papua New Guinea, a community of Papua New Guinea, join us. Usually we do a peace conference every year and it's in person, obviously. And this group from the small community in Papua New Guinea would never have been able to participate in the conference. They actually got, they joined a big group session. And what was fascinating was that in that interaction, we also learned from them, which is that they would ask for a break for their team. They would step away from the camera and discuss until they came to consensus, and then they would come back with a response. And so it was just such an interesting teaching moment for all of us from other who thought we were experts who have, degrees in peace building, et cetera, to really see them using it actively, and then coming back to us with their responses and their interest in various different kinds of tools. So there is this opportunity to reach people, audiences, examples, and communities that we would never be able to do if it was an in-person conference with, airfare and hotel and these issues in play. Other examples of people using tools? Marla, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name. Marlia, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. I met you last Peacebuilding conference, and you gave me the courage to, I do Qigong, but I do it for 15 minutes before class. And I started it during the pandemic, and I told them, you know, I'm gonna mute myself from the audio. I don't know if you're gonna do it, but at the end of the semester, I was really surprised how many appreciated, you know, having that. I thought they weren't doing it, but they obviously really like that, you know, calming. Plus I found some videos in the bottom of the Grand Canyon. It's really beautiful. So thank you for that. You gave me the courage to do that. I appreciate it.
Oh, wow. That is so wonderful to hear. Yeah. As you all know, and I made you do a little bit of it, I feel really strongly that we learn not just here and not just in our hearts, but also we learn throughout with our bodies. And so while that is a real challenge in these virtual worlds, I still really encourage you to get innovative and think about how we can do that. Anyone else? Yes, Sue. Hi, Sue.
Hey there. Along with Sloan at the same school, I'm in student involvement, and we've been working at focusing on some Instagram posts, but we're looking at all those recognition holidays and days of remembrance, but I'm tying them into our student clubs so that we can promote that students are aware of some of the cultural clubs we have and some of the tie-ins, and, you know, try to get more students to participate in those ways. But there's always a club that you can try to tie something into, work with a faculty advisor to present the club.
That's a great example. And maybe a connection that's easier to make in some ways virtually than it would be to try to get everybody in the same space physically with busy lives on campus and otherwise.
We have quite a few clubs that are meeting virtually right now. So it's good to get them all to connect and stay together in some ways.
That's great. That's great. Anyone else? Tools that they have used? Is anyone using something, you know, one of these different? Bobby, thank you.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say, I've been using a lot of Instagram, not academically, but professionally or personally, to figure out like what protests to go to, what's happening in the city. And it's a good way that dissipate information in one source.
Yeah, very much agreed. And I'm sure we're all sort of experimenting. Maybe Instagram wasn't a new channel for you, but still using some of our channels in different ways, creating new channels. I think that has been a really interesting thing. I've had, I did watch, you know, with my son, the AOC, who is a politician out of the Bronx in New York, be on Twitch. She actually played a game, which as a political move was absolutely genius, but also very risky in many ways. And so she actually went on Twitch, which is one of these channels where you watch people play games, and she played with all of these young people. So she met them on their own channel. And I think this is a really interesting way for us all, thinking about classrooms, et cetera, is how we can meet the young people who are going to take these social justice ideas forward. How can we meet them in the places where they are virtually? And so I thought that was an extraordinary example of doing that. Anyone else? All right, well, I'm happy to open it up to some questions and or other ideas. We're right at 1 o'clock. I'm happy to talk about, you know, the Peace Corps as well and the Rotary Peace Fellowships. So if you have any questions like that, I am free. I saw a couple notes in the chat about people who are interested in that. Please, please post your questions and let me know, or just turn off your mic.
This isn't really a big question, but you said you went to Columbia?
I did.
Is that the one in New York?
Yes, yes.
That's great.
Columbia, not Colombia.
Well, no, there's a bunch of colleges, like when you look up colleges, you'll see they take the same name as the Ivy Leagues. So I was curious if it was one of those or if it was the real deal.
Yeah, yeah. So it was the School of International and Public Affairs. at Columbia University. And I had been in Latin America for years, working for a development bank out of Caracas, actually. And when I went back to the United States, I really wanted to be in a place that felt international. And so I really picked Columbia because of the United Nations being in the city of New York, and opportunities for jobs and internships and speakers, et cetera, and interaction with that international community.
I have a question, Anna. Hi, I've met you in a couple seminars ago. Susan Cushman from New York as well, Garden City, Nassau Community College. I have a question for my students. There are a couple here today, and I just wonder, tell us a little bit about the Rotary Peace Fellowship. Are there opportunities for undergraduates in the summer? Are they transfer opportunities? What kind of opportunities exist for students that might be thinking about peace building as a career?
So that's wonderful. So for undergraduates, there are more scholarship kinds of, so they're called these ambassadorial scholarships, opportunities for student exchange, opportunities to spend a year. You have to do it through your local Rotary program. And if you don't have a connection, I'm happy to help make a connection. And the Rotary basically puts you forward as a candidate for one of those scholarships. You can do a little research and see what's available. But pretty much there's an exchange available in most of places where there is a Rotary program. And Rotary right now, one of the reasons why I'm very interested in it as a sort of international organization is because it's in more countries and at smaller communities than the United Nations, than any other organization like that. And so it really has a grassroots appeal. It's also bureaucratic and, heavily white and male and all those things, but it's changing. And it has the possibility for extraordinary reach and breadth. And so for undergraduates, it's mostly about these ambassadorial scholarships and opportunities for exchange. At the graduate level is where I would argue there's a much bigger and pretty enticing in that they offer opportunities for a free master's program, a completely subsidized from your travel and your accommodations to the cost of the program itself, and in some of the best universities around the world. And I think, given my experience, while I loved Columbia and I loved being in New York, and I have a good community from the School of International Public Affairs that I'm still close to, if I had to do it over again, I would have really considered doing it in another part of the world, because the opportunity I had for this mid-career fellowship, which is much shorter, was really eye-opening. And understanding, indigenous approaches to conflict resolution and peace building, and looking at very different models and case studies or situations than I had ever looked at before. And so this idea that you have this opportunity to apply to programs that are in different parts of the world, I would really encourage, particularly if you're interested in international peace building and conflict resolution. Having those contacts in another part of the world and truly having a opportunity at an international perspective was just wonderful. It was really.
Thank you so much. If I consider it for myself, I'll be in touch, but I'm going to relay the information to my students. Thank you.
And they just opened a new peace center in Ghana, so which is for the mid-career fellows. So there's a two-part opportunity now for the mid-career fellows. But before it was just the one program in Bangkok. Anyone else? Any of you interested in the Peace Corps? Come on, we need some Peace Corps volunteers. Yes. Okay. So I see Anna Laura is nodding yes. The Peace Corps is the most extraordinary. I mean, it set the stage and the boundary for everything I did. And I have to say, I had no idea what I was going to do when I graduated from college. I applied to the Peace Corps in the September of my senior year because it seemed like, okay, then I might have something to do. And it kind of seemed like a long shot. So when I was accepted, it was both a big surprise. It also gave me something to do, and it was terrifying. I ended up going to the Dominican Republic. I spoke not one word of Spanish. I had taken French in high school and college, and but it changed the course of my life. And one of the things it did is by having to be spending 2.5 years, close to 3 years in a community where success and wealth was measured very differently from the way where I had, and where the sort of American dream could not be taken for granted in any way, shape, or form. In fact, I spent 2 years being humbled about that idea. But it gave me the foundation for which I've lived the rest of my life without a question. It was the most significant experience I've had. And so I really encourage people to do it. And I hope those volunteers are going to be sent back out. I think there's a big future for the Peace Corps, and it's changed a lot. It's done a lot of learning, but it's also in many ways bigger than it was before. And I would also like to say it's not just about young people coming out of college anymore. The average age now for Peace Corps volunteers is in their 30s. So it is about people taking a break. I wouldn't say a break, because that's the wrong word, certainly not a vacation, but it's of taking a step back from what we might have considered to be a career track, et cetera, and taking in this experience. And so there's a lot of opportunities for people who not just right out of college, but who have some skills, different kinds of professional skill sets under their belt, and really have something to offer these kinds of communities in working together with them. And frankly, I think the biggest thing about the Peace Corps is what you learn about yourself, and what you learn about living with communities that have very different values, needs, and opportunities than you grew up with. I know David's a big proponent because his son was also a Peace Corps volunteer.
Yeah, my son was a Peace Corps volunteer. He was in Namibia from 2016 to 2018. And he taught mathematics on the Namibian, near the Angolan border. And I'm often struck by the kind of interesting backgrounds of students that go into the Peace Corps. In my son's case, my son was a mechanical engineering major. So my son could have gone out and gotten a job as an engineer, which is what he's doing now. But he actually kind of wanted to do this other thing for a while and kind of give back. And so he went into the Peace Corps. Now, naturally, he was assigned to teach mathematics because he was a mechanical engineering major, right? So he knows something about mathematics. But it really changed him. Now, I must tell you, in deference to him and things that he said to me, he's critical of the Peace Corps, right? So, one of the things that we're kind of looking at today, and then maybe we talked about this last week, or I talked about this with somebody, so maybe it was you all, about kind of the colonization kind of mentality that people in Peace Corps might say it takes place in Peace Corps too at times. And how do we get around that kind of notion? And kind of what is the role of Americans going overseas? Now, it is worth, I think we talked about in terms of international education. I mean, I'm a Fulbright grantee, okay? So Fulbright deals with the same thing, right? So you send Fulbrighters to some part of the world to kind of, well, we're going to tell you what America's like and kind of give you the America version of this, that, and the other thing. Very valuable because I did it. But I think we have to reflect upon those things. I don't know. Anna, what do you think?
No, I completely agree. And in a weird catch-22, I also think some of the way where you develop your capacity to think about those things, particularly I'm going to own my white, female privilege in the United States, is to be in situations, one, where you're a minority, which is not an experience I have very often. And so for me, the Peace Corps was also was being, understanding what it meant to be in the minority. I had to learn the language. And so for many, many months, in fact, basically the whole service, but particularly the first year, I couldn't participate. I couldn't use my voice in the way that I had, in other places. Now, of course, I still had, sets of privilege I walked into those situations with, but I became acutely aware and an outsider. And so I think that, it's a big bureaucracy, the Peace Corps, as is Rotary, and there is huge amounts for improvement. And those conversations are happening continually by the Peace Corps volunteers and the Rotary Peace Fellows to push the organization to change. And we can all have a discussion about change within versus disrupting the entire thing. And I think that there is power to both approaches. But in this case, I'm not sure. I mean, I like to think that I would have gained more of a sense of sort of social justice and the limits of, or the idea of privilege and the limits of people's opportunities in other situations and other contexts, but I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. And so for me, the Peace Corps was that awakening. And so in some ways, I would argue it's this, it's about also, I think, and I do think the training for Peace Corps volunteers has changed a lot. I think it's a lot about what you're going to learn and how you're going to co-create and how you're going to support initiatives that are already existing and offer, hopefully a skill base. It's much harder to get into the Peace Corps now than it was. And they often do require a set of skills. So you can't be what I was with someone with like, a great, liberal arts degree and not a lot else to offer to the community except sort of goodwill. But it was an incredible learning experience. And for that, I think it's important.
One of the things that a lot of people don't know about is the program called Peace Corps Response. Anna, you might be familiar with that. Is a shorter term, because Peace Corps typically is, well, I would say 27 months in reality, right? Because it's 3 months of in-country training, then 24 months of service. Peace Corps Response ends up being like 9 months or 10 months or maybe a year. And it tends to skew to kind of older professionals who are kind of wanting to do something else. So I often, when I'm talking to faculty about the sabbatical idea or taking a leave, I'm often talking to them about apply for Fulbright. I'm a Fulbrighter, and some of the other people in this room have been on Fulbrights, but Peace Corps Response is something too. Are you familiar with Peace Corps Response, Anna? Do you know anybody who's done that?
I do, and I have friends from my Peace Corps class who have done it, who maybe went off to graduate school and have like a specific skill. Maybe it's a public health, humanitarian. I think Peace Corps Response, they're really looking for people who have the language already, hopefully have some familiarity with the social context of the country, and have a skill set that's very specifically needed.
And it skews a lot to medical people. Looking for people in medical. Well, we're waiting for Dave Ragland, but I did want to have a little bit of a break. So first of all, I want to apologize for the slideshow. That was all on me. One of the challenges is I was trying to do that and still trying to figure out the breakout rooms, which we actually did figure out, but it didn't seem like we used them. So I apologize for that mess up there, but it seems like it went well. I want to give Anna a round of applause. Everybody give her a round of applause. Anna, do you want to make sure in the chat that your contact information is there if it's not there already? Sure. And then we'll just hang in. Like I said, Dave Ragland did confirm back this morning that he would be here, so I'm kind of waiting for him to come in. But I'll let Anna go. I'm sure she's got things to do. It's a busy time, but I really appreciate her coming in. I apologize again for the slideshow, and then you can reach out to her directly. That would be great. So. Thanks
My
again.
email's in the chat. Good luck to you all. I really think you are very important educators and students. And so I love doing and being a part of this every year. And so go out and inspire and connect to your social justice communities. And thank you for the work you do. Bye.
Thank you. All right, so we're waiting for Dave Ragland to join us. And like I said, he did confirm this morning that he would be here, but I don't see him in the room yet. So why don't we kind of talk about things. This was great, talking about experiential learning and some of the things that Anna does, talking about social justice. Well, I guess what I would be interested in hearing from everyone is really a sense of the social justice. Here's my question: is the role that you as faculty can be playing and your colleges can be playing in advancing the social justice agenda right now? And maybe for the students that are there, what would you expect your college, your community college, to be doing with regard to social justice right now? So anybody kind of, once again, I'll pick you off at the top of my list. Once you want to do your microphone, that means you want to add to it. So think in terms about the role that you should be playing, your college should be playing, and what students are expecting with regard to that right now. So anybody? While we're waiting for Dave. Yeah, Tulin.
Well, as you know, at Montgomery College, we have a very diverse community. And therefore, I developed courses in social justice, and I found that students identified with the issues that we discussed. So I think it's very important to teach concepts of social justice as an alternative narrative to the narrative that we hear in the general society, which is a narrative, in my view, of egoism, of dominance, of perhaps conflict, different views. And so I found a lot of value in teaching an alternative narrative to allow the students to think about the concepts of justice in a different way. For example, one of the ordinary concepts of justice is retributive justice. For eye, tooth for tooth, retribution. But there is also a concept of restorative justice, which is extremely helpful to know about and to think about it.
Okay. Thanks, Tulin. I appreciate that. Anyone else give me a sense of things that they're doing, what could be the role of community colleges right now, and then what students are looking for maybe? We've got a lot of need right now when it comes to social justice. Yeah, Susan.
Yeah, I'll just say again briefly, I mentioned it in our breakfast chat that at my college, we're doing these deliberative dialogues because students, I think, are looking for a safe space where they can ask questions or air their views about this unprecedented election and the lack of results, the kind of limbo that we're in. And so I just recommend it. If any of you are familiar with NIFI, National Issues Forum Institute, and the Kettering Foundation, that's who's been guiding us and some of my colleagues and myself on doing these deliberative dialogues where students can come in to a virtual space. It's not as ideal as a face-to-face, but it's still a space where we've been trained on how to kind of just assist them to clarify their views and to share their views and feel kind of affirmed in that process. And it's really kind of cool because it's really partisan. It's nonpartisan. It's going across party lines. And I have found it very educational for myself personally to learn how to do that peace process for the betterment of democracy on campus, and not being afraid to talk about it. So I just recommend it, and I can put in the chat, I guess, some information that might be of interest to people if you want to get involved with that.
Thanks, Susan.
Yeah.
Anybody else with regard to social justice? Maybe what some of the students are looking for, and what you might want to see on your campus that isn't happening right now. You can put it in the chat, but it'd be great to hear from you. What are some social justice issues that that maybe are unique to community colleges? I mean, one of the things about community colleges is that many community colleges tend to be minority serving populations, first generation college, career oriented as such. Then many students who go to community college might not likely transfer. So this is their, one of the things I always remind faculty in community colleges, and I remind all the faculty, is that don't take your students and say, well, they'll get this when they transfer onto wherever. Maybe half of community college students don't transfer. Is that their time with you is their time in higher education. So what are some issues that maybe are existing in community colleges? Anybody? I don't want to ask people. Sheila, what do you, oh, somebody's opening up. Oh, no, Jillian, yeah, tell me what's going on where you are.
I would just think that in general, if you're just asking what's going on, I think that I agree with what you just said. I'm not sure if we do enough to prepare the students to go out into the workforce. And I mean, I don't know, I don't have any statistics exactly, but I would probably say less than half maybe are going to transfer to university. I mean, maybe down the road, but when they finish up at the 2 year, I'm thinking that they'll probably go into the workforce if they're not already in the workforce. So they need those type of skills. Just, I call them like life skills, to, like soft skills we're already always talking about. We need those. We need financial literacy. I think that's something that we need to focus on, where not just a small group get that type of education and training, but all students. In other words, it should be required that you go through literacy training, and that could be just as basic as understanding how to read your credit report and the importance of credit. I mean, that could lock you out of getting a job, in your career field, because your credit is bad and you didn't even realize what you were doing. And they're giving you all these credit cards, and they seem to be marketing towards certain groups. Oh, hey, get this credit card. And then, not explaining you need to be paying for the credit card. You need to pay it on time, and that will hurt your credit immensely. And for years down the road, just things like that. So again, just some basic literacy. We were good with the education part of it. Yeah, I think we're all great. All the community colleges, I give them kudos. But those life skills, I think we'd be terribly lacking in that area.
Consumer literacy, it strikes me, it used to be a bigger thing. I remember there was a time in community colleges where there was a course called business math, and we used to offer it where I was teaching. And I think Lena taught it for a while. I think she's on the call. She might mention about teaching business math, where the whole course was structured around, this is how interest works. This is what a bank does. This is how you balance a checkbook. I mean, I don't know if people balance checkbooks anymore. In the day we did, right? That kind of thing. And I don't know if that course exists anymore. Now, I do think this idea of consumer literacy, if I will, does exist at the high school level, I suppose. But the failure of it and the absence of people recognizing when they can be taken advantage of. Think about people that sign up for loans with exorbitant interest rates because they take their check and they need to cash it that day, right? So there's a interest rate that cost them, or because they need the money to pay for it, and then they're in the hole. Man, we don't think about that too much, but that's really a big thing. Annette, what are you thinking?
Well, at our college, we have a diversity team, and up until just, I believe, this semester, it was strictly faculty, and they've just begun to invite some students like myself to join in the discussion. And they discuss things like respectful language on campus, things like the universal restrooms, which also include staff student not being an issue anymore. And these are things that don't just affect faculty, they do include the students, and allowing the students to have a voice in some of these decisions and some of these discussions, I think, is really a huge step forward.
Thank you. Anybody else? I'm still trying to reach Dave Ragland to see where he is. So we'll keep going a little longer. And if I feel like he's not showing up, then maybe we'll end a little bit early, but I'm feeling that he's out there somewhere in the ether. Lena?
Yeah, I was going to say that I teach nursing. I always try to talk about how access to healthcare includes, access to transportation, access to healthy foods. And we talk about food deserts, and we always do that in a way that's talking about high income versus low income. But I really have to start talking about it from the racist angle as well, right? Because a lot of that, you try to be non-political. I don't think we can do that anymore.
Where we are, I'm in I teach at Santa Monica College. Something that comes up frequently is food insecurities, just like Lena brought up, but also housing insecurities, because we are, they say, well, it's warm. And so we do have a higher population of homeless here, but with the rising cost in rent and housing, and then the, the ability to afford a house is not there for many. The speculation is it's close to 40% of our students actually have experienced homelessness or are currently in that situation. Some of them don't even know that they are, because they will be bunking at friend's house or sleeping in their car temporarily to get through it. So we have a really good student services that are trying to address those issues. It's just since it's also a local, something that everyone is experiencing, it is a really big concern. So it's called housing insecurity and food insecurity. So we actually have teams of people who are trying to address some of these and help students find housing. And we have somebody who goes out and volunteers, and she goes around to the farmers markets and picks up food and brings them back. And then they have a Thursday where they give that out for free to students. And sometimes they'll have eggs and things, so they wait in these long lines to come in there and get it. So it's really wonderful that the effort that people are putting into it, but I think it needs to be addressed more systemically, I guess.
What's interesting is, I've been to Santa Monica, and we have a stereotype of what Santa Monica is, affluent community, right. But in fact, that's not the reality with a lot of our students. Sometimes, there's this perception, well, depending on where you are, things are going to be okay, but it breaks down all those walls and barriers of students living out of their cars and so forth. And even the most affluent place. One of the issues with California is you have a lot of homelessness in California because people can be outside a lot. I hate to say it that way, but there's this sense of that kind of, so no matter where there's affluence, there's homelessness just the same, Any other ideas, any other thoughts we're thinking? I've not heard from Dave Ragland yet, yeah, Sue.
Hi there. We have at Harper a food insecurity program. We do have a food pantry. At the time of the pandemic hitting, we were working on trying to incorporate fresh foods, but we do have, staples, and they're available to all students just by asking.
That's great.
We also, one thing that is nice, it is really just kind of the drop in the bucket though, but we also offer a gas card program as well to help students with some of those transportation needs. And, unfortunately, due to finances, that is limited, trying to make that work a little more so. We've now, at the time of the pandemic, we began collaborating, and our counseling services is helping to oversee that with us.
Mm-hmm.
It's been really helpful and really successful.
That's excellent. Yeah, food insecurity is a big issue. There was an article in Community College Daily about 6 months ago about how many community colleges have opened up pantries, and that it's just everywhere, and what community colleges can be doing in that circumstance. And you think about students in community colleges who are already, 2 or 3 jobs, single parents, living with, maybe taking care of their own parents, that kind of thing. They often take care of themselves last, right? They've got so many other people they have to take care of, right? They have to take care of their kids, they have to take care of their parents, they have to take care of all these other things. And so they're the ones, and so we see them in our classroom, we say, well, you look very disheveled today. It looks like you didn't get any sleep all night. What's going on in you? You don't look like you're eating, or whatever it may be. And they're doing the best they can. And then you have a side conversation, you realize they're taking care of their parents, they're taking care of their kids. They didn't get any sleep last night because they were up all night. And they're trying to come to class, right? Tulin, you're gonna add, who's Susan? You were gonna add something, Susan.
Thanks, David. I was just going to add that at Nassau, we have a pantry also, and it's called The Nest. And I like the fact that it's given a name, so it's given a kind of identity so that students don't feel in the least bit stigmatized by it. It's kind of like it might as well be a fast food place, like it's called The Nest. And they encouraged us to put it on our syllabus in the last couple of years. And I'll admit, at first I was thinking, gee, there's so much on my syllabus already. I can't believe I'm going to put it on, but I'm so glad I did, because students have said to me, Professor, thank you for putting that on, or I would never have known about it. And I've used it because there's a link that they can go to. There are volunteers that they can connect with. And I think it's less stigmatizing to them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's a good thing that colleges are doing now.
Making these things, stigmatization is important. Making these things kind of normal, right? Like learning services. I think there was a long time where the idea that you would have to go for help in student learning services or whatever it may be was something, but now everyone has to put them on their syllabi. Sheila, go ahead.
I was going to add on to the stigmatism. We just tried a pilot program. I'm on a satellite campus for media and design. And so they put in, it's like a smart kitchen, I guess they call it. And it has like, it looks like vending machines. The students use their card. So you wouldn't know if they're being supplemented or getting their food for free because everyone has to use a card. You swipe it, you can open it up. We have a local place that's doing, it's all, you know, it's for us, it's going to cost $6 to $8, but it's all locally sourced, fresh, really healthy food and everything from vegan to normal. So really good options, and students will then don't have to worry about the stigmatization because everyone's using that same card. You don't know how much they're paying or if they're not. And it also allows you to push a button and pay for someone else's meal so that you can give food away to students as you're doing it. And they just started it this last semester. I don't know if Marlia, you're at Santa Monica. It's at our campus, and it's actually a really wonderful. So I'm hoping it expands out to the main campus.
Is it on the main campus or the satellite campus?
It's at the CMD right now, since they put in they were going to have a cafe and they put it in that space because they didn't get a vendor in time. And the SMC Foundation is supplementing it, and they're adding money.
Cool.
It's actually really
Thank you
good.
for telling me. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So I have not heard from Dave Ragland, so I'm suspecting something's going on his end. He did confirm this morning, so all I can suspect is that it was something last minute and he just hasn't been able to reach me. He confirmed both by email and through LinkedIn. So he confirmed 2 different ways and said he would be here. So, you know, I'm thinking we could continue to talk for a few more minutes. Tomorrow, we will actually have a longer day tomorrow because we have folks from Dawson College talking about depolarizing the classroom through art. We have colleagues, Katie Zanoni and Fran Ferris, who may be on the call now, who are going to talk about their work. And we have, oh my gosh, I lost it. It's with the last session, the middle session, we have Julia Delafield, who's from University for Peace. So in fact, maybe I'll just go ahead and share what we've got going on tomorrow. And I will,